Today I'll be travelling from here in Lancaster, where I live,
to here in the French Alps.
in under 24 hours using only trains and my trusty folding bicycle. My journey starts at Lancaster railway station, taking the West Coast main line down to London Euston. From here I'll be riding the short distance from Euston to St Pancras, where I'll be picking up the Eurostar to Paris. I'll be staying overnight in Paris before hopping on a TGV to Saint-Gervais-les-Bains. I'll be highlighting the options and connections along the way to get you to many popular spots in the Alps, including Chamonix, Morzine, Avoriaz and Flaine, where I'm headed myself. Although I've opted for an overnight stay for my convenience, I'll also show you how this journey is easily doable in a single day. And of course, you don't have to have a folding bike. I'll cover the alternatives to cycling each time I get on my bike. First things first, after arrival at Euston, it's time to unfold Brompton.
So just arrived at Euston Station, got my bike set up, and now it's a short cycle over to St Pancras.
It's a 10 to 15 minute walk from Euston to St Pancras. The quickest route is straight down Euston Road, but I prefer to take the Wellbeing Walk, a walking and cycling route along back streets designated in 2015 that boasts 50% better air quality. Of course, you can also take the tube. It's just one stop on the Northern Line from Euston to King's Cross St Pancras. St Pancras, an icon of Victorian architecture and London's only international rail terminal. So a little about my route. I'm taking the Eurostar from here to Paris Gare de Lyon. In the winter, Eurostar run a direct ski package train service to Bourg-en-Bresse. This provides access to some popular resorts, but not to the Mont-Blanc region where I'm heading. And I want to show you how to get to the Alps all year round, following whatever itinerary suits your needs. While I'm folding up Brompton, let's talk a little about costs. I've booked this train last minute and only business premier tickets were available. Due to the pandemic, I have a bit of a backlog of vouchers from cancelled trips, so I decided to take the plunge. Business premier tickets carry a fixed fare of £245 each way for return journeys, which is pretty eye-watering. However, they are fully flexible, provide access to the express check-in lane and the Club Eurostar Departure Lounge, and you get a 3-course meal with champagne during your journey. Had I been more organised and booked this journey, say, 6 weeks in advance, this outbound leg could have been as cheap as £39. I've never travelled Business Premier before, and I have to say, I'm impressed. I'm checked in and through security and passport checks in a matter of minutes. The lounge is spacious and relaxing, with all sorts of complimentary food and drink available. After catching up on some work, my train gets announced and it's time to board. I'm on the 6:01 PM departure, due into Paris at just after 9:15. With the clocks moving forward an hour, that makes the 350-kilometre journey just over 2¼ hours. And just like that, we're away. It still blows my mind that this train will take me from the centre of London to the centre of Paris, travelling under the English Channel through the longest underwater rail tunnel in the world. Once you've had time to settle in, dinner is served, with obligatory wine with bubbles. Everything's great. Before you know it, you're the other side of the channel and zipping across the French countryside at over 300 km per hour. Although I'm enjoying the Business Premier experience, I can't help but feel wistful about what could and arguably should have been when it comes to the Eurostar. During the original conception of the Channel Tunnel, the intention was for the rail service between London and Paris to eliminate the need for flights, with its pricing model deliberately pitched at just below the cheapest air tickets offered back then. There were grand plans for direct services linking London with many more European capitals and major cities too. Alas, the launch of the Eurostar was accompanied by the budget airline boom. Eurostar launched in 1994 and EasyJet launched in 1995, easily undercutting the rail service, with its low-cost model taking advantage of the effective subsidy most countries continue to provide to air travel, despite its impact on the climate. Eurostar ran into financial difficulties and had to pivot its business model to focus much more on business passengers, who were happy to pay higher prices for a premium service. Hence why Business Premier is as good as it says it is. The plans for expansion stalled and have only recently been revived with the relatively new service to Amsterdam. Using pre-pandemic averages, there were still 46 flights per day between London and Paris and up to 33 per day between London and Brussels. There were also plans to expand the high-speed services beyond London to allow for direct trains to continental Europe from Birmingham, Manchester and Glasgow, among others, known as the regional Eurostar. In a sense, this is now sort of finally happening in the guise of HS2, but with no planned link at present to the HS1 line on which the Eurostar runs, the idea of taking a direct train from Manchester Piccadilly International to Paris Gare de Lyon remains a pipe dream. However, a man can dream, and speaking of dreaming, perhaps the most exciting plans were for the Nightstar service. That is, direct sleeper services through the Channel Tunnel to continental Europe. Routes were devised from Glasgow, Swansea, Plymouth and London to Amsterdam, Cologne, Dortmund, Frankfurt, Brussels and Paris. The plan for this service reached such an advanced state that almost 140 sleeper carriages were actually built, with many of them being fully fitted out. Each sleeper carriage could accommodate up to 20 passengers, split across 10 cabins, all of which had ensuite bathrooms. Sadly, by the late 90s, it was decided that the sleeper service wasn't going to be viable. The carriages were eventually sold to Canada's state-owned rail operator Via Rail. They are still in operation today, largely unmodified, and even with their original livery, on the sleeper service between Montreal and Halifax. So anyone wanting to travel between those two cities can get a taste of what might have been. Had this service been developed and steadily expanded, it really would have offered competition to budget flights. Imagine boarding a train at dinner time in Glasgow before getting a good night's sleep and waking up in Barcelona. Austria's state rail provider, ÖBB, is very much making this possible for many in continental Europe through the widespread expansion of its nightjet sleeper services, which now extend as far north as Stockholm and as far south as Rome. As ever, when it comes to rail, the UK lags desperately behind its European neighbours. Anyway, just like that, we're pulling into Paris. Time to disembark, unfold the bike and find where I'm sleeping tonight. I've booked a hotel more or less next door to the station. Despite booking it last minute, I got a good deal on a single room at the Hotel Libertel Gare du Nord, Swed, coming in at £83.50. I'm pretty chuffed with my room. This will do nicely to get some rest before heading to the mountains tomorrow. After a good night's sleep and breakfast at a Parisian cafe, it's time to get back on my bike and cycle over to Gare de Lyon. If you're on foot and feeling energetic, it's about an hour's walk from Gare du Nord to Gare de Lyon. Or you can hop on one of the regional RER trains. It's just 2 stops on Line D, the thick green one on the map, and takes less than 10 minutes. That said, the RER trains aren't as frequent as Paris's metro, so I'd recommend ensuring you have a good 30 to 45 minutes to get between the two stations. My train is at 10:29 AM, so I'm taking a leisurely scenic route through the city centre. Like many cities, Paris has seriously ramped up its cycling and walking infrastructure in the last few years, with significant parts of the centre now being car-free and a much cleaner, quieter, safer and more pleasant place to be. And the city has recently embarked on an enormous transition to completely pedestrianise the Champs-Élysées. And so I arrive at Paris Gare de Lyon, another of Paris's main train stations. Direct high-speed services depart daily from here to numerous international destinations, including Barcelona, Milan, Zurich and Geneva. The station has 2 terminals, as it were, the main and original Hall 1 and the modern edition Hall 2, where my train is departing from. An arcade links the two, and you don't need to make a note of which hall to go to. The platform number for your train is all you need to know. Today, I'm taking a rather unusual direct service to Saint-Gervais-les-Bains. At the time of making this video, this service runs weekly on Saturdays during the summer and winter seasons, with a direct return leaving Saint-Gervais the same day at 1 PM. If this isn't convenient, the alternative is to take the TGV Lyria, one of which you can see to my left, headed for Geneva, changing to the regional service at Bellegarde-Civals-Serine. Regular TGV Lyria services depart from Gare de Lyon throughout the day, as do the regional onward services. My train today is a TGV Duplex, a double-decker that is now one of the main workhorses of the French high-speed rail network. When booking, you can usually state your preference of being seated either up or downstairs. Although you get better views up top, the lower deck is typically quieter if the train isn't fully booked. Either way, there's plenty of space for luggage. I'm travelling standard class for this leg, and as you can see, it's pretty spacious and comfortable. And we're on our way. As we depart Paris, let me go into a little more detail about this route. Riding this train to its final destination of Saint-Gervais-les-Bains will take just over 5 hours. I'm planning to get off at Sallanches-Combloux-Megève, so it's 4 hours and 50 minutes for me today. Incredibly, the train will actually travel more than half the total distance of the journey in the first hour as we hurtle along the high-speed line toward Lyon. Incidentally, the first high-speed line built by the French and opened in 1981. We'll peel off this line not far from Lyon, just before making our first stop at Bourg-en-Bresse. From here, it's a much slower paced trundle as we gently wind our way through ever more dramatic scenery. Another reason for the slow progress later on in the journey is our itinerary includes a few longer stops of 10 to 20 minutes at a couple of stations. As a result, with reference to the alternative of taking the TGV Lyria earlier, I should add that some of these connecting routes were actually 10 to 15 minutes quicker than this direct service. But it's nice not having to think about changing trains. All TGV trains have fairly decent and reasonably priced catering facilities on board, from a bar bistro carriage called Le Bar. There's a good variety of hot and cold food options, alongside typically French high-quality wine and beer choices, and hot and cold drinks. As it was still fairly early in the day, I opted for an espresso and a Madeleine. It's also worth mentioning at this point that French TGV trains are also equipped with Wi-Fi. And it's about as good Wi-Fi as I've used on a train. I've even had video calls while travelling on these trains. And like that, we're approaching our first stop. You may be wondering how I've booked my tickets for this journey. My Eurostar leg was booked through their website, which is straightforward enough, but people are often surprised to discover that you can book many European train journeys directly through the train line. They used to have a separate European train booking section of their website, but now it's all integrated. I booked my return trip from Paris to Sallanches-Combloux-Megève through the train line and can happily recommend it. An alternative is the SNCF Connect app, which is available in English and is also very good, but transactions are in euros, so make sure you're not using a credit or debit card where you get charged for foreign transactions. Although we've slowed down, the scenery from Bourg-en-Bresse onwards is simply stunning. Both the natural beauty and the feats of engineering are quite something to behold. Before we reach the Alps, we travel through the less well-known Jura Mountains, a subalpine mountain range wrapped around the north and west of Geneva, but mostly on the French side of the border, with beautiful dazzling rivers carving their way through it. You might be wondering what the toilet facilities are like on board a TGV Duplex. In my experience, they're very well maintained and kept clean throughout the journey. I'm pleased to report this is how things looked about 3 hours into this trip. And so, having passed through the Juras, we arrive at Annemasse, a medium-sized French town right on the Swiss-French border. So close to the border, in fact, that it almost feels like a suburb of the major Swiss city of Geneva. And there's a cycling and walking greenway, or voie verte, between the centres of the two settlements, meaning it only takes about 25 minutes to cycle between them. Rather disconcertingly, the train departs Annemasse in the same direction from which it arrived. The onward route here would take us around the southern shores of Lake Geneva, or Lac Léman as it is properly known, to Évian-les-Bains. And yes, that's the spa town Évian, where the water comes from. We, on the other hand, are going to be taking a different fork that'll wind round the Alps, passing through a few more stations before reaching my stop. So here we are getting off at my stop, Sallanches-Combloux-Megève. The nearest station to Flaine is actually Cluses, the one before this one, so I'll be cycling back in that direction. However, I wanted to take the opportunity to tell you about this stop. Despite its name, the station is firmly in the town of Sallanches. However, there are regular onward public bus services from here serving the beautiful mountain resort towns of Combloux and Megève. So if you're heading for either of these places, this is where you'll want to get off. And so begins the final part of my journey today. A cycle through the valley before a mountain climb on my trusty bike up to Flaine. This part of the Alps often features among the mountain stages of the Tour de France, so this isn't a climb for the faint-hearted. I have the benefit of some electric support on my Brompton, but it's a pretty serious cycle even so. The peak of this climb is the Col de Pierre Carrée, the highest paved pass in the northern French Alps, and a firm favourite among cycling enthusiasts. Of course, you don't have to cycle this part if you don't want to. Bus services operate between Cluse and Flaine throughout the summer and winter seasons.
Well, there we go. I've finally made it. I am at the top of the Col de Pierre Carrée. Now I just have a little roll down into Flaine, and we're here. We're in the French Alps, and I think the view, even at this time in the evening, is making it all worth it. Thanks for coming along.
But wait a minute. Didn't I say at the start of this video that I was going to show you how to get to a number of other locations, including Chamonix? Well, dear viewer, just for you, I got up the next morning and headed back down the valley to explore the other possible routes, including using the magnificent Mont-Blanc Express. Fortunately for me, it's almost all downhill, and I mostly kept up with the cars. We'll be continuing yesterday's train journey throughout the spectacular Arve Valley, or Vallée de l'Arve, and we resume our travel at Gare de Cluse, picking up a local train that'll take us to the final destination of yesterday's TGV, Saint-Gervais-les-Bains. But speaking of Cluse, as well as the bus service to Flaine I mentioned yesterday, which stops at the popular resort of Les Carroz, there are also regular bus services to Morzine, and from Morzine you can take a passenger cable car up to Avoriaz. On the ride to Saint-Gervais, we catch our first glimpse of Mont Blanc, which is snow-capped all year round. Saint-Gervais is a resort in its own right, with an all-year thermal spa and is the centrepiece of the extensive Saint-Gervais Mont Blanc ski area. On arrival, it's just a matter of crossing the platforms and boarding the Mont-Blanc Express. This will take us to Chamonix, but actually continues beyond Chamonix to Valenciennes on the Franco-Swiss border. This railway is part of France's main SNCF network, but is actually operated by a Swiss company and uses the same rolling stock you see on other mountain railways in Switzerland. Construction of this line started in 1899 and the service to Chamonix opened in 1901. It's a truly monumental feat of engineering. And it's on this railway that the scenery really goes up to 11, as we wind up through tight gorges into the Chamonix Mont Blanc Valley. Though this part of our journey also brings us face to face with one of the reasons we ought to choose rail over air whenever we can, the rapidly receding glaciers of Chamonix. The rate at which Chamonix glaciers are melting has been accelerating since 1960. It is estimated that the two largest ones, Argentière and Mer de Glace, have both lost 800 metres, almost a whole kilometre of their lengths over the past 30 years. And a 2019 study from the University of Grenoble anticipated that on our current emissions trajectory, the former will be completely gone by 2080 and the latter by the end of the century. With that, we arrive into Chamonix. I find the station here quite magical. To be somewhere theoretically so remote, yet still so connected to civilization, is quite something. There's nothing to do now but take a little break, or une petite pause, for a sandwich and a coffee before making the return journey. Estimates vary a little, but there's consensus that travelling by train typically incurs at least 90% lower carbon emissions than by plane. And this gap grows each year as electricity grids internationally get steadily greener. While it isn't always practical or affordable, many more people have both the time and money to do more international travel by rail than they do at present, and this needs to happen if we're serious about drastically reducing our carbon emissions. So that's it. That's Lancaster, or London for a wider audience, to the Mont Blanc region of the French Alps. This short guide is by no means extensive. There are of course many variations to my route that'll take you to other tourist destinations such as Annecy, Aix-les-Bains and Grenoble. But I hope I've shown you how easy and enjoyable it is to get to some popular French destinations by train. On my return journey, I did the Cluse to London leg in an afternoon, boarding my first train at Cluse at 1:11 p.m. and getting into central London well before 9 o'clock. I'd love to know what you think about this video in the comments below. Have you made a similar journey? And if so, how was it? And would you like to see more of these guides from me? If so, what journeys would you like to see? All that's left now is for me to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.